Over the course of my professional life, I created countless presentations by myself in different teams or together with design agencies. Doing so, I realized that there's a handful of universally applicable things that you should avoid when you want to make a winning presentation. I will share with you these 5 things in this video, so no matter in which industry or at which career level you are, following those tips, I guarantee that your presentations will be more effective and professional than ever before. Let's look at this real-world presentation, which is not too far away from many other corporate presentations I have seen, and discuss the first piece people struggle with, the introduction. So I found this presentation from the Harvard Extension School online, freely available for download to everyone. On 17 slides, it introduces the Extension School, the degree path, and the ways to apply. However, all that does only become clear once you have read through all of the slides. Except for the cover page, which is still lacking some crucial information, there is no introduction to the presentation. No agenda, no nothing. But especially the beginning of your presentation is crucial to take the audience with you on your journey and set the scene. To make a proper introduction, you should first know who you are talking to and what your audience's level of knowledge about the topic of the presentation is. You should also think about your goal and the expected outcome of the presentation or sharing the slides. Maybe you're only informing your audience, or maybe you would like to request a decision or approval. Once you are clear about those questions, you can structure the introduction of your presentation accordingly, such that the audience feels comfortable and knows who you are, what the presentation is about, and what is expected from them. In practice, this means that you should include the date, location, and author, be it a single person or a department, on the title page, besides the title and subtitle of your presentation. That's how people know who is responsible for the content and can be approached for any follow-up questions. To set the expectations, you should include a slide with the goals or the purpose of the meeting or presentation. Make clear what you expect or what you would like to transmit with this presentation. In our case, Harvard Extension School would like to inform potential applicants about the Extension School itself, the opportunities it offers, as well as the way towards enrollment. Now that people know, okay, this is a piece of information with helpful information and resources, they might wonder what is included in detail on those 17 slides. Therefore, you should always include an agenda in your presentation that lists the topics you are covering in a logical order. Having taken a look at the presentation, I know that it is structured along 5 broader topics, namely an introduction about the institution, a look at the available certificates and courses, an overview of their student resources and other benefits, application and admission details, as well as contact information for further questions. Including an agenda and maybe section dividers as well helps you to structure the presentation and helps the reader to better navigate. In case someone is only interested in the application details, they could directly jump to that section. In our example, I believe the agenda and order of topics makes perfect sense, starting with a general introduction, presenting the education opportunities, student benefits, and finishing with the application details. But it's not always the case that a presentation's storyline is that clear, but certainly one of the most common pitfalls I have seen. Oftentimes, presentations are all over the place without a clear structure, which makes it difficult to follow. Just imagine if our example presentation here would start with introducing the available resources, club affairs, and student associations, followed by the application process and contact information. No one would know why all this information is relevant, because neither the Extension School itself was introduced so far, nor the courses and education path for which you would be applying. A logical and well thought through storyline is key to take the audience with you through a presentation and get the most out of it. Take enough time to think through an intuitive presentation flow before starting to create the actual content. Another thing that tends to wreck presentation is its design. Just look at our exemplary presentation that somehow uses a common theme with Calibri as the most used font and black, blue and red as the primary colors. But besides, the slides are quite random and do not use a standard slide template and do not adhere to any standard design principles. Just look at the headlines that are jumping, different font types and sizes, different margins, different title formats, or the like. Overall, there's way too much going on without a clear common theme, which makes it very difficult for the reader to properly follow and read through the presentation. Sometimes the eyes are just too busy to navigate on the slide and digest the format changes from one to the other slide instead of focusing on the actual content. Therefore, it's crucial to adhere to common design principles that do not only help you to create a presentation much faster because you can just follow those guidelines, but it also makes it look a lot more professional and easier to absorb. I have redesigned some of the slides of the initial Harvard presentation by using a standard PowerPoint slide master that helps to adhere to common margins, titles, and text locations or font sizes and types. You can see that by just using the standard template, the slides are a lot easier to read since the titles and text are nicely aligned to the left, text boxes are always at the exact same place, as well as font sizes and types do not vary from text box to text box. Just by tweaking the slide a bit, you can tremendously change its appearance and make it so much more professional and pleasant to read, which in turn will help you to better inform or convince the reader. I mean, wouldn't you expect the highest professional and educational standards when applying for Harvard Extension School? Of course, but just from looking at the original presentation, which might be a flagship presentation to attract students, this expectation might not yet be met. So besides using PowerPoint slide masters and common design guidelines, you should ensure to make your presentation as visual as possible. Of course, it depends on the purpose of the presentation and the audience, but a presentation without visuals and suitable illustrations does not make sense in my opinion, because this is the actual purpose and power of a presentation. Transmitting information in a visually appealing and engaging way. Just listing a bunch of bullets or plain text in small font could also be done in an email or a Word document. So if you create a presentation, always think about how you can structure or illustrate the information in a more appealing way than just listing a few bullets. I took 3 quite wordy and misaligned slides from the Harvard presentation and quickly redesigned them to make them a lot more visually appealing and thereby easier to grasp, in my opinion. The first one being one of the Path to Degree, which was originally shown with a few word art, arrows, and some pictures. I simply drew a literal path from left to right with the 4 checkpoints on the way. Very clean and easy to read. However, if you would like, you could add icons or some more explanatory text as well. Second, I took the slide that listed the available resources to HES students. The original one seemed a bit messy with the text being aligned centrally and with different font sizes or colors. So I took a slide, divided it into 4 squares, each with a title and a text box left aligned, and listed the resources. As you can see, it's exactly the same information, but a lot cleaner. And third, I transformed the very wordy slide on the Student Association and took the existing structure, but introduced a few visual elements that split the slide and made it a bit more visually appealing. So as you can see, it's not always about fancy graphics or crazy illustrations, but very often about the simple things, starting with the question of how to better organize and structure a certain piece of information. Whilst following your storyline and keeping an eye on your audience and the goal of your presentation, you should always question if information is actually required within the presentation. Ask yourself if this additional slide provides value that is required to advance the story, or maybe it's just nice to know information that is not necessarily required to make a decision or transmit the overall message. That's, for example, the case with this slide that gives some background information on the Office of Pre-Degree Advising and Admissions. It lists a few numbers which are interesting but would probably not help you with your decision to apply or not. In case you have such information that you would still like to include in a presentation, but it's not core, might not be required, or might not be interesting for everyone, just move it to the backup. You can always include a separate section in the back of the presentation that is labeled as a backup or appendix and have additional, potentially more detailed information for interested readers. Best practice is to reference the backup slides on the respective slides in the main section. For example, by saying that for this piece of information, there is more details in the appendix. By using the backup, you can trim down the main section of your presentation to include only the absolutely necessary information. If in doubt, just include as little as possible and as much as necessary in your presentation. I'm super glad that I could download this PowerPoint presentation from Harvard Extension School. But at the same time, this underlined one of the biggest mistakes I see when working with presentations: sharing them outside the organization in a PowerPoint format. In particular, this might be problematic if your organization uses a special PowerPoint master with certain logos that should not be made available for outsiders. This wasn't the case here with our exemplary presentation, since they just used the standard PowerPoint master. But most corporate organizations have tailored slide masters, sometimes even with bespoke font types or designs. So the best practice to share presentations outside an organization is in PDF format, which makes it no longer editable. It might even be useful to send PDF versions internally, for example, if people look at the presentation on their phone or on a device where they cannot readily open PowerPoint files. Talking about PowerPoint, if you want to learn which PowerPoint add-ins can boost your productivity at work, watch this video next.